Do you believe that a doll can be haunted? What? Hey guys, I'm Kimmie. Welcome back to the attic for day 5 of 31 days in the attic. Today we're talking haunted dolls. And if your answer to that question was yes, you are certainly not alone. And I will get to that in a second. First of all, why am I am not in my normal attire. Yes, I am in my version of Sally from A Nightmare Before Christmas. I just shot this makeup look, if you will. And I'll post it down below if you're interested in seeing it. And I thought, while I'm dressed like a doll, why don't we go ahead and make another doll video. I wanted to do this video. This was one of the videos I definitely wanted to do when I decided to do this series. I have always liked dolls from when I was a very little girl. My mother, this is a kind of a strange story, but she used to go grocery shopping at the store. And when you bought a certain amount of stuff, every time you spent a certain amount of money, this is hair extension. I think we can lose this. Every time you bought a certain amount of money, they would give you a doll. I know it's very, very, very strange. I have no explanation as to why they did this, but they did it. And my mom that year probably collected like 20 dolls. And I was very young at the time, maybe 5 or 6. So they were like these really, really pretty dolls. And it kind of started me down the road of liking dolls. So I don't have a doll collection. The ones behind me is the only 2 that I have. But like I said, if you are someone that believes in haunted dolls, you are certainly not alone. If you have ever been on eBay, go to eBay and search haunted dolls. And what comes up will amaze you. I'm telling you, it will amaze you. Everything from playful, wants to be around people, to I just want to get rid of this thing. I mean, people trying to sell their haunted dolls. And I have to wonder is there really a market? Is somebody out to buy a haunted doll? It's very strange. I shouldn't say it's very strange. What do I know? But I certainly wouldn't want one. Here's the thing. I'm not sure if I believe in haunted dolls, but I don't not believe in it enough to want one. To go out and try to purposely buy one. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but it's out there. There is a market, I guess, because like I said, if you go over to eBay, you will see a world of haunted dolls for sale. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co-hosts for the evening. These are the 2 dolls in my collection. We have Megan and we have Molly. So we'll start with, let's start with Megan. So, and Megan has a teddy bear. She does. Okay, so Megan, I purchased a couple of years ago. I've had her a couple of years. And they used to have a place out all the way on Long Island, like all the way out east, where people on the wealthier side would donate furniture to like an estate sale. I guess it was like an estate sale. And the furniture would not be very expensive. It wasn't just furniture. It was also like plates and like house items, all kinds of things. And all the money went to charity. So I picked up Megan. I picked up Megan there. So Megan was wealthy at one point. Now she lives here in the attic. But at one point she was wealthy. But nobody really has an issue with Megan. The issue people seem to have is with my Molly here. Molly I purchased in Salem, Massachusetts, years ago. I mean, the last time I was over 10 years ago. That was the last time I was there. And I went into, I love like a thrift store, not even just a thrift store, like an oddities kind of store, like a store that has like old, not necessarily weird things, but old things. I just love those kind of stores. I'm not talking like antique, like expensive antiques or anything, just like interesting things. And I got Molly at one of those places. And the lady that sold her to me told me that she was over 100 years old, that she's from the 18 something. I don't know. She looks it. I definitely believe it. Now, I am telling you, I have had so many issues with people coming up to the attic and wanting me to turn her around or even put her in another room because they are so, she makes people so uncomfortable. Why? I don't know, but it kind of goes back to it, right? So apparently a lot of people do think that dolls can be haunted. I don't know. And they've asked me. I've had people flat out ask me if Molly is haunted. And the answer is no, right? As far as I know. We'll see. No. I've had Molly for about, like I said, I've had Molly a long time. So today I'm going to talk about six haunted dolls. Some of them you may have heard of. Some of them you probably haven't. I know at least one of them you have. Yes, of course I'm going to mention the famous Annabelle. And but she is we'll get there. Anyway, we're going to talk about 6 dolls, and I'm going to tell you like the backstories basically. And most of the stories, not all of them, but a lot of them do involve children because usually it's children who start with dolls. And it reminds me of that old show Twilight Zone. I remember there was an old Twilight Zone where one of the dolls like kills Terry Savalas. It's actually one of my favorite Twilight Zones. And in that Twilight Zone, Rod Serling says, "To a child in turmoil, a doll can be a lot of things." So the question really is, do you think that energy can come off on a doll? And for a lot of people, I think that answer is yes. They absolutely believe that. So whether you do, who knows? That's up to you. But let's go ahead and talk about some haunted dolls. Okay, so yes, we are going to start with Annabelle. That's the doll that you probably know from The Conjuring. Now, I have a very, very unpopular opinion coming at you. I didn't like The Conjuring, but I thought the first 15 minutes was amazing. And I wasn't the only one, because that first 15 minutes basically set off the Annabelle franchise. But that first 15 minutes in that movie, that was like the real story. The rest of the movies, I mean, if any of it was real, were totally made up. Just those first 15 minutes, that was like based on what actually, they say actually happened. So Annabelle was actually a Raggedy Ann doll. The real Annabelle looked nothing like the Annabelle in the movies. She was a Raggedy Ann doll. And she was purchased by a woman for her daughter. Her daughter was in her 20s, and she was a nursing student, and she had a roommate, and the mother gave it to the daughter. I guess she liked dolls, who knows? And they just started noticing some funny things were happening. The doll would move on its own. At first, it was very subtle. They would notice that it was on one side of the room, and they would look, and maybe the doll would kind of just be in a different position, but then it got more. So basically, they would purposely leave the doll somewhere and remember where they left the doll, because they started to realize that this doll was moving on its own. When they came home from work or school or whatever, they would notice that the doll had moved. It would be in one room, they would come home and it would be in the other. It would have its legs crossed. The biggest thing, one of the really most interesting things that happened was they found the doll kneeling. Now the doll was a rag doll, it was a Raggedy Ann doll, so it couldn't kneel. But they found that the doll was kneeling one day. They would also find notes on parchment paper, and they didn't have parchment paper in the house. So where was it coming from? Who knows? And these notes would say, "Help me, help us, help Lou." Lou was Donna, the doll was Donna's, was her roommate's boyfriend. So eventually what the girls decided to do is to bring a medium in. And the medium said that the doll was haunted by a little girl named Annabelle, and that she was, she just wanted to be, stay, basically. And that she had been killed somewhere near the complex, or had died somewhere near the complex. And the girls felt, bad, of course. So they invited her to stay. And after that, things really started to get strange, especially for Lou. It seems that Annabelle did not like Lou. She put a curse on Lou. And he apparently woke up one day with the doll near him and had like claw marks going down his stomach or down his body. And they healed rather fast. Like, they weren't like regular marks. I mean, obviously anybody would be freaked out. So basically after that happened, I believe the story is that they got in touch with a priest who knew the Warrens. The Warrens were like controversial. They were like, I can't remember what's the word for people who like not chase ghosts, but I can't think of the word. Paranormal specialists. That's not the word. There's a word for it, but so they came and they got Annabelle. Now they took Annabelle away, and that was the end of the problems. They had no more issues. So the weird thing is that Annabelle was probably a new doll. That's what I find strange. Most of these stories, they go back to like these dolls are old or whatever. But Annabelle was probably new because the dress that Raggedy Ann had did not predate 1970, and she was purchased in 1970. So that's the kind of strange thing. And the way the doll's behavior, this was like a malevolent, a bad, but not good, like spirit. Malevolent. I can't say the word. Why am I even trying? Anyway. More than likely was not a spirit of the dead girl Annabelle, but was some kind of, you know, not a nice spirit. Not a nice thing. So it was like, if you ever saw Paranormal Activity and the psychic is explaining the difference between a ghost and a demon, it seems that Annabelle was haunted by some kind of demon, probably, not a person. And so the Warrens took her, they put her in their museum, and you could go and see her. You could go and visit Annabelle. She was behind a glass box up until I think only a couple of years ago. Both the Warrens have since passed away, and I believe that Annabelle is in like their family members' care. There was like a thing because she wasn't in her case. I read this the other day when I was doing a little bit of research for this video, that like the town went crazy where they are because they found out that Annabelle was not in her case. It turns out that, you know, she was somewhere. I don't know. But like people thought she got out. And they were like really in a panic. So obviously people, you know, there's also another story that there was a guy who was visiting the Warren Museum, and he was like threatening Annabelle and saying that, not threatening her, but like, I guess like talking smack. And Annabelle put a curse on him, and apparently he had a motorcycle accident that very day. So that is the story of Annabelle. Now the other stuff that you saw in the movies, like, you know, with the whole like cult thing, I don't know. I didn't think those movies were very good, but that's not the actual story. The actual story, if you're interested, is really like those first 15 minutes in the first Conjuring. And that is the story of Annabelle. But is she the most haunted doll? Stay tuned. The number 2 doll on our haunted doll list is Mandy. Now, if you've never heard of Mandy, she lives in Canada. She lives in British Columbia in the Quesnel Museum, and you can still visit her there if you wish. Now, she was brought to that museum in 1991, and the curator of the museum says that she actually remembers the day that they brought Mandy to her, because right away she felt there was something a little uneasy about the doll. And when she asked the woman who was bringing her, the woman simply said that the doll was fragile, she was already cracked, and that she had kids, and that she just didn't want the kids to break the doll. It was a present from her grandmother. So the curator said, okay. So it was kind of a common thing for them to put the doll or whatever in a bag, like a plastic bag, and that was just in case there was bugs in it. So apparently, when they did this, the bag moved. Like, people witnessed the bag moving. And when they took pictures of the doll, they left the doll in like the lab overnight, and when they came in the next day, there was just like stuff everywhere, kind of like a child had a tantrum. So it was inexplainable. It was basically inexplainable. So they put Mandy in the front of the museum, and people would kind of complain. They said that she would make them feel strange. She would make them feel sad, that people felt like her eyes were watching them, were watching them move, and that when they tried to take a picture, the pictures would not come out. They just would not like come out of Mandy. So people started like kind of, saying that they were uneasy with Mandy there. So they decided to move Mandy to the back of the museum. So not everybody passed her. You would only see her if you wanted to see her. So what happened, Mandy didn't like that, apparently, and she would start tapping on the glass, and staff members would say that, like, their lunches were moved, and, like, they would hear footsteps, and the worst thing is that they would hear crying. Now, Mandy had a lamb. They gave Mandy, like, a little toy lamb. And she was in a glass case. And when they would go, they would hear this crying, and then when they would go to her case, the lamb would be outside the case. So how did it get there? If it was in the case with Mandy, now it was out of the case. They decided to bring a medium in to do a reading on Mandy. And the story that came out of this was that this doll was found in a farmhouse with a young girl who had died in the farmhouse. It was abandoned. So we're not really sure what happened to this girl, but she had the doll, Mandy, with her when she died. And how she was found, a man was walking past this abandoned house and heard a crying. So he went in to see where the crying was coming from, but the girl was already dead, and the only thing there was the doll. Who knows? So, upon hearing this story, the curator went and visited the woman who had brought her the doll originally and said, you know, was anything funny? Did you really bring me this doll because you didn't want your kids to break it? And she said, no. The doll would cry. I would hear crying constantly coming from wherever the doll was, and I can't take it anymore, and I just wanted to get rid of it, and I haven't had any problem since. So it seems that it was Mandy crying. So basically, the people at the museum, Mandy has not done anything evil or sinister, but she likes attention. And what happens is now when the people who work at the museum hear Mandy crying, they go and get her and walk her around. Sometimes they bring her back to the desk and, like, put her in their lap while they work, and they have no problems. She seems to like that. So who knows? But like I said, if you want to visit Mandy, you absolutely can. She is still there. And yeah, she likes attention. So she'd probably like it if you went and paid her a visit. Our number 3 haunted doll on the list is Okiku. And this, I think I'm saying that right. I hope I'm saying that right. This doll comes from Japan. So here's the story. And this is another doll that I believe you can still see. She's still in this temple. So she was purchased in 1918. And the man that purchased her gave him to his sister. Gave the doll to his little sister. His little sister was, I believe, only 2 years old. And her name was Okiku. And she loved the doll. She absolutely loved this doll. She was always with the doll. Unfortunately, she became sick and she passed away. And after she passed away, her family decided that they would put the doll in her shrine. They had a shrine to her, so they put the doll there. And what happened after a couple of, I'm not sure how much time went by, but the doll had like hair down to here. And what happened was that they noticed that the doll's hair actually grew. The doll's hair was growing. And nobody could explain it. It was tested, and it came back that the doll's hair was human. The doll was growing human hair. That's the story. And that it was obviously different, like it felt different from the rest of the doll's hair. And the family would also say that they heard like noises and voices and all different kinds of things would happen when the doll was around. But that it was kind of like they didn't really mind it because they felt that it was the spirit of Okiku. So eventually, though, they did relocate, and they didn't want to bring the doll with them because they were leaving like the site where she had passed away. I believe that's the story, how I read it. So they wanted to leave her there. So the temple took her in, and she's still in the temple, and her hair is still growing, and you can visit her there. I believe you can visit her there. And she's significantly older now, and apparently her mouth is starting to open. I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah. So if you are interested, if you find yourself in Japan and you want to pay Okiku a visit and see her hair, I don't know. I think I might do that. Next on the list, we have Charley. So Charley is our number 4 haunted doll. Now, the legend goes that this story takes place in upstate New York. A family moved in the house. They had 5 daughters, and they found Charley in a box. He was like buried in a trunk with a bunch of newspapers and a note with the Lord's Prayer on it. Nobody knows exactly where Charley came from, but the newspapers were from the 1930s, so they assumed that he came from around that time. And they didn't think anything of it, and they had 5 daughters, and the daughters had lots of dolls, so they just put Charley in their collection. But strange things started to happen, and the girls became very, very, very uneasy when Charley was around. They all became nervous, and the youngest said that Charley actually spoke to her. But the parents didn't believe them. They thought there was just like an overactive imagination. But because the girls were so afraid of Charley, they had to lock him back up. So they locked him back up in the trunk. Years went by, and they never, ever, ever had another problem. They sold the house. When they sold the house, they sold everything in it, and they sold Charley to somebody else who had kids. Same thing happened. But what's weird here is that Charley seems to only affect children. The parents never seem to notice anything. So eventually went from family to family to family. They all had problems with the kids with Charley. So Charley ended up in a small store in Beverly, Massachusetts. But I don't think he's there anymore because I wasn't able to find out about his location. So I'm not sure where Charley is right now. So if there's a trunk in your house, maybe you should check it. Okay, in at number 2 is a doll called Letta, short for Letta Me Out. But I'm not 100% sure why. And I wasn't able to find a lot of information. This was one that I had never ever heard of. But apparently this doll is over 200 years old and is made completely of wood and human hair. But again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anybody knows how, what the story is behind this doll. If you do, please give us some information. So apparently the owner was found him in an abandoned house. Now, what he was doing there, I'm not sure about that either. Actually, I read 2 stories. I read one that the owner found him under his house, and I read another story that he found him in an abandoned house and brought him home to his house. And as soon as he brought him home to his house, very strange things started happening. Hearing voices, marks on the floor, children having nightmares, and eventually they said that they could see the doll move on its own. They tried to get rid of it, and apparently when they tried to get rid of it, they couldn't physically get it out of the car. So instead they decided to keep it, and now they actually tour Australia with it. And you can actually if you're brave enough to let Letta sit on your lap, then you can let him. You can let Letta sit on your lap. I don't know. I don't think I would do that. I don't think that's a very smart idea. Even the next time I find myself in Australia, I think I'll skip that one. But yeah, if you have more information about this doll, I would love to know. Apparently it has its own Instagram page, but I didn't check it out. I probably should have. I probably should have done that before I made this video. But yeah. So if you're interested, you can follow him. And finally, our number 1 most haunted doll, Robert, who resides in Key West, Florida. And if you've heard the rumor that Chucky from Child's Play was actually based on Robert the doll, I have read that is not true, but who knows. So Robert was given, no, I've heard conflicting stories. I've heard that he was given to his original owner by his father, and I have also heard that he was given to his original owner by a servant that worked in the house. But both of them were named Robert. The doll was named Robert, or was given the name Robert, and the boy was named Robert, but he went by the name Gene. His name was Robert Gene Otto, I believe. And him and Robert became very, very good friends. And the relationship was a little strange between Robert and Jean. As Jean grew up into adulthood, his relationship with Robert remained the same. And he would refer to Robert as a person. And it was, you know, somewhat strange. Different kinds of things that would happen, or mischievous things that would happen. Of course, Jean would blame on Robert. Who knows? When Jean died, the next family that took over the house inherited him, and they claimed that Robert the doll would change expressions, that they would hear giggling, that he would move on his own. Eventually, they donated him to a museum in Key West, Florida, where he remains to this day. And if you want to visit him, you are strongly advised to introduce yourself. If you want to take a picture, to ask his permission and to thank him for allowing you to take the picture with him. Now, the story goes that those who haven't done this, who haven't asked Robert for permission to take the picture and have taken it, have gone through a lot of misfortune, such as divorce, sickness, accidents, and the museum gets letters upon letters upon letters of people who felt that they wronged Robert, that they didn't respect him. And when they left the museum, all these bad things in their life started happening. And they write it off to the fact that they didn't greet Robert the way they were supposed to. And the museum gets letters every day from people asking Robert for his forgiveness. They also sent him candy, treats, and they just want to be friends. So if you do find yourself in Key West, and you do find yourself in this museum, I would highly, highly recommend you introduce yourself and you say goodbye. And you ask Robert if you can take a picture. Don't just take one. You know that's rude anyway. There you have it, guys. There are 6 haunted dolls. Now, there's other dolls out there that are haunted, but those are the 6 that I picked. Now, have you heard of any of these dolls? What do you think? Do you believe in haunted dolls? What are some more dolls that you would be interested in learning about? I'm very, very curious. I know there's Ruby. I've heard of the Elmo. There's actually a haunted Elmo. Can you believe? It's like a, you know, remember Tickle Me Elmo? Well, there's a haunted one out there somewhere. I don't know. What do you guys think? Guys, thank you so much for joining me, and for joining Molly, and for joining Megan. We are so happy that you could hang out with us tonight in the attic as we talk about haunted dolls, and I hope to see you tomorrow night for another video. Bye, guys. Say bye. Say bye. Bye-bye.